In this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 most common mistakes we find in Google ad campaigns that could cost you your advertising budget and potentially profitable sales. I'm going to talk about this in a retail setting, but there's no reason that some of these could not be applied to other settings such as lead generation campaigns. And I've put this together based on the dozens of ad campaigns that I've audited over the last few months. And these are as I say, they're the most common mistakes that we find. And some of these are probably the easiest to resolve as well, and they're going to have the biggest impact on your ad campaigns. They're going to be very applicable in today's campaign types. Very often, it's very common to use smart campaigns these days. A lot of new accounts that we come across are heavily reliant on automation. For example, in the case of the most automated campaign type you can have in retail is Performance Max. So these are very, very particularly important in those cases. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through each of these 5 mistakes that we find. I'm going to show you how to spot them and how to address them. So this is going to help you if you may have been running campaigns for some time, you've been spending your advertising budget but not quite seeing the performance that you want, and basically becoming frustrated by why it's not succeeding. So some of these are going to answer, I'm sure some of these are going to answer those problems and those frustrations. This is essentially the framework that we use in our agency, and it's about getting the right foundation in place and then getting control over your ad campaigns. And we kind of treat it like a 3-step process. Start is about getting the right foundation in place, getting the right strategy in place, and then getting control of your ad campaign so that you're controlling it to do what you want it to do for you and your business, and then essentially securing it as a reliable sales channel for your business. And that's what it basically comes down to, is driving it in the right direction for the objectives that you want at the end of the day. As an online retailer, you're going to want to maximize your online sales potential with Google Ads. It's primarily going to be very search driven. There is going to be a finite amount of people searching for your product online at any one time. So to get the most of that, you want to be able to maximize, basically spend as much as you possibly can with Google Ads. So if you're not getting the consistency that you want, you're going to be reluctant to do that. So by addressing these mistakes, then you're going to get your campaigns in a better place to be able to and maximize your opportunity online. So one of the first mistakes we see, which is probably the most common, is conversion tracking. And this is either it isn't installed at all, or it's not installed properly, or it's not configured properly. In one form or another, conversion tracking plays a problem. And the reason for that is it plays a huge part in how your campaigns are optimized. Machine learning and AI aside, if you are managing campaigns manually, you still need to be able to see what data is going in to be able to make informed decisions. And when you're overviewing a Google ad campaign, you want to be able to see that it's working or not, and you're going to base that on what conversion actions you see. So either way, it's got to be in there. But today, it's become more important because of AI and because of machine learning. Your campaigns are driven by artificial intelligence now, and the more quality data, the more data and the better quality that data is, the better it's going to be able to optimize. So it's important to get this right. So as I say, sometimes it's not installed at all. If you want to check if you have your conversion tracking installed, log into your Google Ad account, click Goals, Summary, and you'll see a list of conversion actions in here. What you're ideally looking for in a retail setting is that you're going to be tracking purchases, and that needs to be set as a primary action. Any other action should ideally be set as a secondary action. If you've got more than one, you might be duplicating events, or you're recording more than one action and setting it as a primary action, and that's what you're telling your Google campaigns to optimize towards. So that's something just to be aware of. As you can see here, we've got another purchase event set up here. This is imported from Google Analytics. We've got it set to secondary. It's just so that we can keep track and check how the data compares to see if ever there's any problem with one type of measurement over the other. We've also got softer conversions here, shopping carts, add to cart actions, and start checkout, for example. These are both set to secondary. If you're starting campaigns from scratch and you don't have much conversion data, your campaigns might struggle to optimize, particularly if you're in a niche that is perhaps low volume. We work with a lot of retailers that sell quite technical products. Sometimes they get quite niche. For example, high-end mountain bikes or something like that. You're not going to be selling hundreds a month. In those scenarios, if you're niche, or if you're launching a campaign that is quite niche, then you might want to consider perhaps softening the conversion action to get your campaigns to optimize towards that sale. So you could consider putting, say, add to carts as a primary action and optimizing towards that, and then start to see sales, and then if you've got enough volume of sales, you could revert that back to a secondary action and then make a purchase your primary action. When it comes to volume, Google advises that you need 15 sales a month on average over a period of 30 days. Our experience is that campaigns are better at optimizing when you get it closer to 30 or more. So that's also something to think about. Mistake number 2 is going to be giving Google too much control. Now, at the end of the day, we use artificial intelligence, AI, for Google Ads campaigns to be optimized, and it does that very, very well. But so it is great to give it, to give it enough room to move and enough room to optimize. However, there are some things that you've got to watch quite carefully. And one of the top things is auto apply. To check this, you log into your Google Ads account, click recommendations, and then click this icon here at the top, auto apply. And in there, you're going to see what things are ticked that Google can adjust itself. Like, as you can see in this screenshot here, we've got 0 for maintaining your ads. We've got 0 of 8 selected, and grow your business, we've got 0 of 14 selected. And the reason for that is we like to keep control of Google, the campaigns. We don't want it creating assets. We don't want it moving bid strategies around. We don't want it moving budgets around. And that's potentially, if you've got the wrong thing ticked, that's what can happen. So without your knowledge, Google can essentially move the objective of a given campaign. So it's in my view, that's quite important to have disabled. This shouldn't hinder the optimization of how shouldn't hinder the optimization of campaigns. At the end of the day, moving on from there, still under the giving Google too much control heading is assets. At the end of the day, you can give your campaigns, or your in Performance Max specifically, it's an automated campaign. You're going to have a number of asset groups in place for which you're going to configure assets for it to go into other channels outside of Google Shopping. So one of the things that Google want you to do is they want you to generate as many headline titles as possible. The problem is with this is that you don't have any control how and when these titles are shown. So let's take, for example, you're selling golf clubs online. You've got a number of brands in your makeup. You've got your campaign set. You've gone and say, okay, we're going to use this campaign to target golf clubs. We've got titles. We've got Ping golf clubs, Ping G425 iron set, Ping G425 driver, Ping G. So this is like a certain type of iron set. That is a particular club. That's a particular brand. And then we've got Callaway Rough ST Max 24. That's a type of club. Callaway Maverick irons. That's an iron set. So all of these might be applicable. You might have these products might well be in your inventory for this campaign, which is great. The only problem is you don't know what search, the search intent or the way that an individual is searching online, which might end up with an ad that doesn't really make any sense, because Google can pick any one of these up to 3 and use that in an ad, for example. So I might search for, let's say I search for Ping iron set. So Google might go, Ping G425 iron set. That's an appropriate title. But it also might put Ping G430 driver in there. Or it might, less likely, but it is possible that it might even put in there Callaway Maverick irons. So with that, I'm going to see an ad that reads Ping G425 iron set, Ping G425 driver, Callaway Maverick irons. So it's kind of said, we've got this, we've got this, and we've got this. But you've wasted real estate and been able to push any of your unique selling points of the store. Like, why should I click on you? Why should I click on your ad? And I might get a bit confused to say, well, I want the iron set. Is it a driver or the iron set? Or is it a Callaway Maverick iron? I don't know. So it can result in the ad looking a bit odd, not making any sense in the context of how a search has looked online. But it's also, like in this particular example here, it's very product focused, which is fine to do to a point. But really, you want to kind of mix it up and add some other key points in there. I've got, perhaps highlighting that you've got a range of Ping irons in stock, rather than just trying to hone in on one. Just as an example, if I search for high quality iron sets or high quality golf clubs, then this ad may well serve, but it isn't going to make any sense in that respect because my search intent hasn't indicated that I'm after that particular product. So you've got to kind of think about it. How might somebody search online, and how is the ad going to look? Is it going to make any sense in those cases? And going a bit deeper into how, giving Google Ads too much control. One of the things that you've also got to make sure is that you're in the case of Performance Max or shopping, or search, for example, most of your campaigns in Google that are delivering your revenue are going to be search driven. So it's driven by search queries that people put online. And then your ad is served as a result of that search. What you want to make sure is that the search queries that you're seeing your ads come up for are relevant to the business. It also, one of the things that it will do is that, and this is more common actually, it's pretty good at keeping your search terms on theme. But what it can do is it can embed itself in a purchase process that's established by another means, say organic listings, or maybe you've got meta ads running. So what will happen is you'll get people coming back to your store from perhaps finding you via another means, and then they're going to search for store name rather than product name. So if you're using Google Ads as an acquisition engine, in this scenario, it isn't going to be doing its job properly. And therefore, if someone searches for your store name, your ad comes up because naturally it's going to have a high conversion rate. AI is going to see that. It's going to see the numbers. It's going to go, oh, that search term has a high conversion rate. I'm going to lean on that. It doesn't know the context that you want it to be an acquisition engine, not to go for traffic that's generated via any other means. All it sees is keyword, click, high conversion rate. So as the more that happens, the more often it's going to serve ads for your brand name. And in this example here, I've blanked out the search terms for privacy because it's from an account that I audited. But in this case here, of the revenue that was generated, 3.2k was actually generated from searches for their store name. So that is also, so not only is ad budget being wasted on this that doesn't necessarily need to be wasted, obviously it's something you need to look at. Have you got competitors bidding on your brand name? If so, it might be worth setting up a separate brand campaign in that scenario as a way of protecting your space. But in this case, the campaign's purpose was to drive sales from new customers, using cold search audiences. And in this scenario, we've got a fair amount of revenue that's actually being attributed to their store name. That actually creates two problems. One, yes, you're wasting budget on something that you don't want to be spending your budget on, but also it's going to distort your metrics, because when you look at the overall performance of that campaign, a percentage of the revenue that's come through from that is going to be from that, the store name search queries. It isn't like it might, you take that out, it's going to bring your return on investment down. Is it still acceptable? If you're using, if you're considering that it's a customer acquisition engine, then you want to make sure that the traffic that's coming through and the cost and revenue and performance metrics associated that are for when you're targeting that audience, not an audience that you've actually generated from elsewhere. At the end of the day, you're going to be looking through this for search queries that relate to the products that you're selling. Are they nice and varied? Are they you're gonna want different search queries that are relative to different points in the buying journey. So while you're looking at this, it's also good to try and diagnose, are my ads coming up for a nice range of search queries? One of the approaches we use is called the intent cascade method, where we make sure that ads are coming up for search queries that are of general interest, active comparison, and ready to buy. The only thing is, with just going back to the example where the ads were being triggered for the store name, it's actually right at the very, very bottom here. So yes, in effect, in the eyes of the AI, the machine learning that drives your ad campaigns, it's right. It's got buyer intent. It's high, so it's going to go for it. But in terms of what you want from your ad campaigns, objective-wise, it's probably not ideal. You're going to get people searching for products in some ways that are very, very general, as in the type of product or what it is. For example, I want a kayak, and you're going to find people that are right near the end of that buying journey that have gone for brand and model, so they search for it that way. So you want to see a nice mix, ideally. And to get to this report, it's relatively easy. Navigate into one of your campaigns, click Insights, scroll down, and you'll find search terms, and then you can change date ranges up here to kind of view what kind of search queries are triggering those ads. You can change this column here to be clicks or conversion value, and so you can use it in a number of different ways to figure out if your ads are being triggered for the right search queries, and B, is it going for the right search queries? Are they on theme? And have you got any exposure to searches coming in for your own name? At the end of the day, you're trying to kind of get a nice sort of not an even distribution, but you're going to find that 70% of your budget is going to be committed to search queries that are ready to buy. Not only because they've got higher intent, but they're going to be more expensive, versus general interest, where you're probably going to see around about 10% of your budget is spent in those, because the cost of traffic is lower, because the conversion rate is lower. There's going to be a bit less of it in that respect in some way, in some cases. Going to depend on what niche you're in. But you're looking for a kind of nice balance of different search queries. I'm going to come back to this in a point later on that's going to be, that's going to cover this in a bit more detail. So if you want to know a little bit more about this in terms of keyword targeting by, the stage of the funnel, I'm going to cover this in a few minutes. So just going back to if you spot anything here that you want to exclude, it was a bit more difficult when Performance Max campaigns were first launched, but now they do support negative keywords. So if there's anything in here that you want to keep out of your campaign, be it your store name, or for example, you see something that's really off theme. Sometimes products overlap with a kind of generic word or term or name that is too broad or too vague. It doesn't represent the product brilliantly. You might want to end up excluding that. And if you do want to exclude it, you can just navigate to audiences, keywords and content, click keywords, and you'll be able to add negative keywords in there. So this brings me nicely to misinterpreted metrics. And I think it's kind of nice. It's nice to sort of put in a nice point that I've kind of just mentioned about the inclusion of brand traffic. I say brand, when I say brand, I'm talking about your store name, not the brand of a product. In a campaign, it's going to elevate the conversion rate. It's going to elevate the return on ad spend. You're going to get a low cost per click. So it's going to make the campaign look like it's performing better than it is from an acquisition viewpoint. So when it comes to metrics, you've got to have some kind of context, like headline metrics in an ad campaign. This looks great, doesn't it? It spent £1,096 in April, and it's generated 43.6k in sales with a return on ad spend of 2,223%. But what's the context? Like, how is done it? What has driven it? Is it traffic for the store name over a product? Is it just a couple of products driving that's got a very high average order value and therefore inflating the return on ad spend? What return on ad spend is needed to break even for those products that are generating that versus others that aren't doing anything? So it's great to see these higher metrics, but you've got to dig into to make sure that they, in what context are they being applied? Is that good for the season or is it bad for the season? You don't, without kind of applying that kind of oversight, you don't know. In a campaign, you're going to have varied product pricing, you're going to have varied product margins. The key objectives might be different. For the business, there might be a sale of a certain product that is better for your business long term because they have a better return rate, or you've got a better chance of upsell, or the support needed or returns problem is less. So when you dig into the campaigns, is that actually better for your business, or is it just a high return on ad spend, which looks great for Google? It looks great on paper. In terms of your bid strategy, it's going to go, oh, brilliant, I'm doing what I need to do. I can spend more. Is it spending it in the right place? So context is always key. So this brings me nicely on to oversight. This is another mistake we see. Is like number 4 would be lack of oversight. It's about knowing what's happening in your ad account, and then you're going to have if you know that in the context of what should be happening, you're going to know when and when not to react. So as a result, if you don't really know what's going on in the scheme of things overall, for example, seasonality. If you see a fall in sales in a campaign, or if you see a fall in sales in general, is it because it's seasonality, or is there a problem? In those scenarios, in one you would react, another you might not. So it's good to have a kind of idea as to what's going on in your ad account. Are said campaigns supposed to be performing at certain times of the year? Are they going to perform not perform so well at certain times of the year? And an element of this is going to be dictated on how your campaigns are structured. I think about it like a high-end mountain bike. When you get it out of the box, when it's new, it's going to perform really, really well. But as time goes on, the more you ride it, it's not going to perform quite as well. Its performance is going to deteriorate. So you have to maintain it. And your Google Ads account is no different. Like, things will change, things move. Market demand will change. Seasonality will dictate that. Market's going to dictate that. Your competitive landscape is going to change. So that's going to affect the cost of your traffic. That's going to affect your conversion rates. Are you compared on price? Is somebody undercutting you? Has somebody got a product that's better? Are you out? Are you out of stock of your key product? So knowing as to why something is happening is going to enable you to make the right call in terms of reacting to, should I do something with this campaign? Should I push more budget to it? Should I pull back on it? Should we be expecting a decline in sales at this point in the year? Should we be turning it off even? And it comes down to like seasonality. Questions to keep in mind are like, what are the traffic trends we expect? You're going to have some business intelligence on this because you'd have been running your business for some time. What sells at what times of the year. But taking golf clubs, for example, golf club set throughout the year. Google Trends is a great tool for this. If you just search for Google Trends online and then put in a kind of broad search query or keyword for like the thing that you're selling, you're going to get an idea of what seasonality is. If this is, if it's something that you're new to. For example, golf clubs see a bit of a dip as they come into October through February and then start to ramp up in the summer. Of course, conversely, golf jackets through the winter, you get a bit more interest and it comes down again into the summer. Looping back round, it comes to context, like what's happening and in what context. An oversight is going to play a big part. And then if you've got a better idea of what's going on, you're going to be less inclined to jump to conclusions and make the wrong call when it comes to making a change. The final point that I wanted to make when it comes to mistakes is not leveraging Google Shopping properly. When you're running smart campaigns, particularly Performance Max, it's going to be heavily weighted to Google Shopping. And the reason for that is that's where the highest purchase intent is. That's where your highest conversion rate is likely to be. It's where your traffic is going to be the best. Is going to offer the best return on ad spend. In most cases, a high percentage of your spend, probably 80 to 90% of your ad spend, is going to be focused on Google Shopping, and that's where most of your sales are going to come from. So with that, it's very important to make sure that you've got a Google Shopping feed, a Merchant Center account connected to your ad account, and a Google Shopping feed fed to it, and that it's serving your ads on Google Shopping. I think it's not very often, like in terms of Google Shopping not being leveraged at all, that's actually not that common. It's more about how the feed is optimized. And that is that's another data point that your smart campaigns are going to use quite heavily or rely on quite heavily to identify what your product is and what the audience is going to be. So who it's going to serve the ad to. And that's going to be the key. And that's the bit that often gets neglected is the shopping feed itself. You've got to think, so when you approach that, you've got to think about who you're advertising to. What are you selling? And like, let's take an example here for kayaks. And it's a little bit like the internet cascade method I discussed earlier, is that you're going to get a range of different search queries and they're going to have a different level of intent. So take something that's very, very broad, for example, kayaks or recreational kayaks. I haven't, with that search, if I use that search query, I haven't got very high intent. I haven't really told you what type I need. I haven't told you what it's for. I haven't told you what brand I'm interested in. All I'm saying is I'm interested in kayaks. I might be interested in buying one. I might be interested in hiring one. There's not really much. So as an overall kind of search volume for that kayak, it's big. There's a high amount of it online, but the cost per click is going to be quite low because of that lack of intent. But I'm higher up the funnel, if that makes sense. And then as I get more specialized, for example, I want to see kayak, then you're kind of narrowing it down. It's like, okay, you're interested in a kayak for this purpose. And typically you're going to see search volume online get smaller for that. For example, 2,400 monthly searches. I pulled that from the keyword planner. The cost of traffic is going to increase a little bit for that. There's going to be less of it. My intent increases. Then moving further down the funnel, for example, I might be searching for, I've decided that I want a premium fishing kayak. I've done my research. I've figured out what brand I want and I'm narrowing it down to a couple of models. So I then might search for that make and model and specification online. So the purchase intent with that keyword is very, very high, but the volume is going to be very, very low. But I think my point is here is that through that journey, wherever I am in it, I might come into that journey in the middle, at the bottom or at the top. You want your shopping feed to be optimized to be able to gather as much as that up as possible and then let the Google machine learning optimize around how it bids for those keywords. So if it's not fully optimized for that kind, for that potential journey, then you're going to miss out on some of that opportunity. So think about how how your shoppers are likely to search online, both at the low end and and at the high end. Particularly in sort of like sports outdoor equipment, you're going to get very, very technical. That's also going to be key information that all needs to be included in your feed, in titles, descriptions, and then in attribute enrichment. You think about how your product titles and your description will satisfy these needs or these searches online. It's also going to be important to include on your landing page, because when people land on your product page, it all needs to make sense. If I search for a particular make and model, or I might search for a particular specification of something, then that needs to be apparent on the landing page that product satisfies that need. And it goes back to the intent cascade method I mentioned earlier. You're going to see a kind of 10% of your budget spent in general interest. Going back to the kayak example, broad kayak. I want to buy a kayak, or I'm looking for kayaks. I'm looking at kayaks. Active comparison, sea kayaks, premium sea kayaks, carbon sea kayaks, and then the ready to buy search queries. You're going to see a larger portion of your budget spent down here. And that's more because of the cost of traffic is going to get higher, because other people are going to be bidding on it higher, so it pushes the cost up because the purchase intent is high. There is opportunities to be had up here in the general interest area. It's just what you pay for it. With regards to the intent cascade method, I do discuss this in more detail in another video, which I'll link down in the comments. So if you want to dig into a bit more about how this works, or how smart bidding works relative to this, and how you want to think about it from an optimization point of view, I'd strongly suggest going and checking out that video. So that brings this video to a conclusion. We've gone over the 5 common mistakes. Just to recap, we've got conversion tracking. Is it installed? Is it installed properly? And are you recording the right action to get your campaigns to optimize towards? It's about having a bit of control over Google ad campaigns, about how they appear to users, making sure you're not allowing Google to move things around. You want to keep it focused on your objectives and the guardrails that you've set. Provide some oversight, so you've got an idea of what's going on, so that if you do see changes in sales, traffic, or whatever, you'll know whether you do need to react or not. And then make sure you've got your shopping feed optimized to cover off all the potential searches that somebody might search for your product. So I hope you've liked what you've seen here today. If you did, please hit the like button, and if you want to see more, subscribe to the channel, because I'll keep these coming. Also, check out some of the videos, as I've said, other videos we've done. As I've said, I'll link to the other one in the comments, so that you can check that out too. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.